Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, August the 7th. And welcome to our commentary. By the way, we recorded a few hours ago, we recorded our weekly podcast with Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. It's on the Blog Talk Radio website. I also post the link on my blog, so you can listen to it there or over at Blog Talk Radio, or you can check it out at Twitter where I post these things. And it was a very interesting chat. We talked a great deal about the one story that I want to mention today a little bit, and that is that Chinese and Russian warships are fooling around in the waters of Alaska. Now, they have not come in they're still in international waters. That's my point. So they're not threatening the United States directly. But the fact that China and Russia would put ships like that close to Alaska, they're engaging in some kind of military operations. That's what we understand. But the fact that China and Russia would do that, it's almost like in your face, President Biden, we can do whatever we want. Now, when you combine the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine, when you combine with that the fact that China is walking all over the world, basically turning lots and lots of countries in the third world into clients of China, it becomes very interesting because this is a new phenomenon. That is, I guess people are not afraid of the United States. They're not afraid of consequences. So, I don't know what the administration's reaction is going to be. Maybe they'll do something. I think they sent a couple of destroyers out to sea just to show the flag, and that's okay. That's a good thing. But the mere fact that Russia and China would come that close to Alaska to do military operations or military preparations or naval operations, that should send a signal to every American of just how dangerous the world is. Number one, it's a very dangerous world. And number two, honestly, it should also send a message to everyone that the world does not fear President Biden. And that's what worries me the most, frankly. We may get into a war simply because we're going to have to react to somebody. And, when countries are weak, that's when they invite aggression. And right now we're weak. Now, our military is still the best. There's still a very strong military, of course. But the leadership is very weak. The leadership is very disengaged from reality. I mean, when you have a president of the United States who's more concerned with, promoting abortion or signing executive orders to pardon or cancel student debts, that's not serious leadership. That's not the kind of leadership that you need in a world like this. Again, a very dangerous world where China and Russia are coming together in a very scary way. I mean, a union of China and Russia militarily could be a real threat to the United States. I mean, when you combine their military resources, the nuclear capability of Russia, the conventional military forces of China, when you combine those two together, you have an awesome military force that hopefully we don't have to confront. But it's certainly something that we need to be aware of. We need to be concerned with. And so far, the message of this administration is that they're more interested in pronouns than in actually doing something about national security around the world. So big story, big story. Check it out in our conversation today with Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Again, that's available on the podcast. You can hear that on the podcast. We mentioned briefly yesterday, and I've got another post coming out about this on Tuesday morning. We mentioned that the U.S. women's soccer team had been defeated at the World Cup. Now, anybody, obviously, losing can happen to the best of teams. This is not the first time that the favorite has been eliminated in a tournament. But this time around, the favorite was such a favorite and played so poorly in the first, in fact, in the games leading up to the elimination period, they played very poorly. And according to the experts, they played fairly well in the game against Sweden, but again, couldn't score. And then when it came down to the penalty kicks, they couldn't get one in. And what I find interesting is the reaction of the country to this. Franklin, let me just give you an example of a reaction. This is from Franklin Graham, who is a religious man, the kind of man who's known for his charity and for doing a tremendous amount of work for poor people all over the world, as well as here in the United States. And this is how he reacts. I'm going to read quickly to you from a tweet that he put out yesterday. He said, "I used to pull for our women's soccer team, but recently they have shown disrespect for the U.S. and have used their platform to promote the LGBTQ agenda. When they lost, I wasn't sad." When you look at the overall reaction, not just of Mr. Graham, but when you look at the reaction of many, many people around the country, they were almost happy to see this lady, Megan Rapinoe, miss her penalty kick. They were happy to see this team lose because this team really turned off a lot of Americans who wanted to cheer for the team, but had a difficult time cheering for a team that would not respect the flag or show respect for the national anthem of your country. So, I don't know what the Soccer Federation is going to do. I know very little about them. I assume they're the ones who are going to put together the next team, but they're going to have to take a very hard look at image and how all of this comes across to a nation that likes to see its athletes respect the flag when they go to a tournament in another country or when they're playing the national anthem. I mean, I think the message to future players has to be very clear, and that's what my post is about coming out on Tuesday morning. The message should be very clear. If you don't like the national anthem or you don't like the flag, then you know what? Stay home and watch other young women play representing the United States. I'm sure there's a lot of young women out there who would love to go to these tournaments and represent their country and probably do very well. But this team, I think, has a lot of problems. And scoring goals is one of their problems. But I just think the attitude of this team, the overall attitude that they projected, was a very bad one to a country that I think expects their athletes to correctly and respectfully treat the national anthem of the United States. So check out my post tomorrow. And again, if you go on the internet, don't be surprised if you have a lot of people who agree with me on this and agree with Dr. Graham in the comments that I made before. Well, you probably saw that on Friday, a bunch of teenagers went out on the streets in New York around Union Square and created what a chaotic situation. Something similar happened in Chicago. And when the mayors of these two cities were forced to address the issue, instead of dealing with the problem, which is a bunch of unruly young people who need to be disciplined at home and perhaps by the authorities, they came out with all kinds of excuses and all kinds of things that really don't address the problem, but rather create, frankly, a situation where this kind of outrage on the part of young people could very well happen again. Because there doesn't seem to be any casualties or consequences, any consequences in New York for this kind of behavior. So, the mayor of New York, I was talking to Bill Katz about this today in our podcast. Of course, Bill lives in New York City. And he was telling me this mayor is just such a disappointment, Mayor Adams. There were many, many good aspirations, and there were many good feelings about Mayor Adams. A lot of people thought that he would be at least more interested in fixing the crime problem than he's turned out to be. I said something last November when we had our midterm election that the worst thing that happened to Mayor Adams is that the Republicans didn't win the governorship in New York. Had the Republican, I think his last name was Zeldin, had Mr. Zeldin been elected governor of New York, I think he would have been a lot more helpful to Mayor Adams in providing the resources and support to fight the crime. But now he's stuck with a very weak Democrat governor and, frankly, a city council that is really worthless when it comes to fighting crime. So if you live in New York, unfortunately, you're going to have a few more problems with respect to the crime. And, of course, we hear more and more people are leaving New York, which means, of course, they're losing tax dollars, because when people leave, well, they take their tax dollars with them to another location. It was on this day in 1945, or actually it was yesterday, August 6th, 1945, that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Then they came back a couple of days later and dropped the second bomb on the city of Nagasaki. And this is one of those moments in the 20th century where President Truman had to make a very difficult decision. Do I try to end the war right now, or do I prolong the war? And the war would have lasted for a very long time without those two atomic bombs. So I think history has pretty much accepted the reality that Mr. Truman, President Truman, made the right decision. And I think he did. 78 years ago today, when he told the nation that we had dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Very tough decision. I cannot think of a more difficult decision than dropping a bomb that kills 100,000 people. But at the same time, he had to look at the big picture and realize that the war had to end, because the United States could not go on for years and years fighting this war. And certainly an invasion of Japan would have ended up killing a lot more people than 100,000 in Nagasaki, or Hiroshima. So anyway, one of those tough decisions that presidents get to make. And I think in this case, he made the correct decision. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.